Message after the message.
For those who don't know, it's Brett.
Friends, it's never going to end. Friends, let's do it again. Oh, Brett, he talks to people about stuff. He's the podcast man.
Yes, great. There we go.
Yay, man! I feel like I need to put my glasses on because your background's got such a short focal length. Oh, there! Oh,
there we go.
Yay! Okay. Do you want to raise the thing up a little bit so you're not cutting off your head?
Yeah.
There you go. Beautiful.
Sorry about that. I had to switch to my fiance's phone. My phone is glitching out for some reason.
It's all good. Yeah. It kept on coming on there. Well, hey, it's a completely casual, free-form show. Thanks for being spontaneous and coming on the show in a moment like that. I like that. It's kind of fun. Made me a little nervous at first, which welcome to the show. This is episode 82 of Brett's with Friends, my silly little podcast. And where we talk about passions, and I actually don't know you very much personally. Just I've seen you around for 25 years. I know you're an amazing fucking artist. It's ridiculous how talented you are.
Thanks, man.
It makes me a little jealous sometimes because I see how clean your lines are, and so we're gonna just get into your methods. And I simply like to start like a past, present, and future sort of situation. So can you tell us a little bit about you, where you grew up and when you first knew that you could paint, baby, or draw?
Yeah. Absolutely. So basically, I was born in Korea, grew up in Ohio. Basically, my parents moved there when I was like 3.5 or 4. And graduated, went to art school at RISD. Graduated with an illustration degree. And so basically when I was growing up, I always did art. I was always like the best artist in my class, and just was always interested in drawing, especially drawing. Really built up my skill by just copying. So when I was a little kid, I used to copy dinosaur illustrations, and then when I got into like middle school, I started copying like Calvin and Hobbes because I just thought Bill Watterson was such an amazing artist. And then by the time I was in high school, I was copying like Frank Miller and taking my favorite panels from The Dark Knight and like blowing them up poster size. So that was what I would do for fun. And then when I got to RISD,
just curious, real quick, were you blowing them up freehand or were you using a blow up?
No, it's all freehand.
Okay.
So that was the challenge of it for me was, can I copy this with just my brain? So I wasn't using any transfer methods, and it was so funny because I didn't even realize, but that's like probably the best training you can have for art school is just copy shit, copy artists that are better than you, because when you're a kid, everyone's better than you, and that's okay because that's where you're supposed to be. You're learning. And it turns out that the best way to learn is to copy other people that have done it better than you. And you learn their technique, and then you can apply it to your own thing once you get mature enough to actually have your own voice. And I kind of learned that quickly when I got to RISD, because I was sort of expecting the talent level to be like at I don't know what I was expecting. I guess I was expecting the classic like big fish in the small pond, and now I'm the small fish in the big pond kind of thing. But it turns out that even at RISD, the number of people that take drawing and draftsmanship seriously, not that many. It might be different now. When I was going to school, it was 92 to 96. So it was a very different time. But, as it turns out, there was only a handful of people in my class that took draftsmanship as seriously as I did. And so when I got there, it was great because I was like, oh shit, I'm still kind of ahead of the game here. And everything that I've been doing as a practice applies literally perfectly to what I'm trying to do now in art school.
The drafting aspect of it, what is it about that aspect? That's obviously, I guess you are a technical artist. You work.
Yeah.
So
very much, especially in college.
How do what is that? Just numbers and lines and physics? Is that what that is?
It's so when, before I got to school and I knew what technique was, all I knew was I was trying to make my shit look like their shit, right? And it's one of these things where the more you do it, the more you notice that things are off, right? So if you do it just a couple of times, you might think, oh, this kind of looks like that. But then if you really took a look at it, you go, oh, I can actually point out 11 or 12 things that need to be shifted around, right?
Okay.
Then when I got to school, I actually, because illustration at the time, especially in the early 90s, art schools were really taken over by postmodern abstract bullshit art. I call it high concept, low execution art. And RISD was no exception. They were neck deep in that bullshit. And so when I got there, I was actually quite surprised that they didn't really have a serious painting program at the time. Everybody in the painting department was painting abstract. And there's nobody doing figurative work except in the illustration department. And, so once I got into
abstract, it's hard to get back, man. Sometimes it's fun. I love doing psychedelic landscape abstracts and with palette knife, and it's so fucking fun. And I've been doing a lot of that motif, and it's been, the idea is the same idea, but reworked a million different ways. It's kind of fun to do. Yeah. Anyways, sorry, I digress.
Yeah, and look, I'm not preaching that there's a right way or a wrong way.
Oh yeah.
For me, it was that when I got into, from the time I was in elementary school, one of my biggest sort of fascinations was the Sistine Chapel specifically, but more in general, the sorts of the training and education that Michelangelo and Da Vinci had, when they were learning, because it was very highly publicized that, they would secretly go and dissect bodies, because at the time it was like heresy to cut open a human body. And so they had to study anatomy in secret. And, of course, Da Vinci's whole unpublished treatise on anatomy that he never finished, that's now published. And so I was kind of obsessed with that. Yeah. And so by the time I got to art school, I was like, I need to recreate for myself that education. And so I went about very deliberately finding out what professors were teaching anatomy, anatomical type, drawing, figure drawing, that kind of thing. I was concentrating specifically on figure drawing, figure painting, sculpting with clay and with stone, and anatomy. And so I was basically I had a minor in human anatomy, specifically morphology, because I didn't really get into the viscera or any of the systems in the body. I was only studying what's called myology and osteology, bones and muscles, right? And so I actually ended up getting a crazy education in anatomy, because I lucked out. My whole life has been defined by how lucky I get. But when I was a freshman, there was a professor from Brown University. He was a 35-year professor at Harvard, then moved to Brown, and became a professor emeritus when he retired. He was an anatomy professor. And then he got bored, came out of retirement at 76 and came to RISD and said, hey, would anyone be interested in an artistic anatomy course where I just teach? And I'm like, so I took his class. There was so much interest that he ended up creating two classes. One was beginning anatomy and one was advanced anatomy. After I took both classes, I became his TA the next year. And so I basically retook another full year of class, this time assisting him with the advanced anatomy class. We actually shared a cadaver with one of the Brown Med classes. And so we did human dissection, and, it was a pretty serious class. We were doing animal dissections as well. And I just basically for 2 years, for 2 straight years, that's all I did was study anatomy, did direct studies, muscle studies, skeletal studies, things like that, and just got super, super obsessed with that. And then when I was a senior at RISD, I was actually lucky enough to get accepted into an honors program. It's called the European Honors Program. And I spent my entire senior year living in Rome in one of RISD's. RISD has a big, they own a palazzo in Rome. And so would take classes out of there, and then just lived in Italy for a year. Just got to study Renaissance art directly. But yeah, going back to that draftsmanship stuff. So when I got to RISD, I had two professors who were basically like my mentors in the illustration department. And they taught me the fundamental sort of drawing concepts that had been perfected in the Renaissance, right? And so it's, you see a million books about this. Every book about figurative drawing teaches the exact same thing, which is forget the details, just do the large shapes. You're trying to get the large shapes right first. As you get the larger shapes right, then you break them down into their largest components. Then you try to get those shapes right. Then you break them down even smaller. And as you go from big shapes to small shapes, your line quality is also going from very, very faint to darker. So as you get more detailed, your lines get darker. And so if you follow those two fundamental concepts, right, which is forego detail for large shapes, because you're trying to get the proportion correct, and forego dark lines for light lines at first, because your initial lines will be wrong. And so instead of erasing, you can just draw over your lighter lines with slightly darker lines, and then they will take it. And so, you know, I had these two professors that kind of like pounded that into our brains. And then the one professor who was my real mentor, because he also taught me how to oil paint, I also became his TA for 2 years. And so I was, yeah, so I got a work study.
Teacher's pet.
Yeah. Honestly, I would say, especially for someone that's in art school, if you have the option, become a TA for your professors, because you get to take the class over again. This time you're seeing it from the other side. Now you're actually answering questions, you're helping people. So you're just like, repetition is the key to learning, right? And so what you're doing is you're just drilling that, every bit of that teaching down into the hardware now. It's like not in the software anymore. Like it becomes muscle memory when you do it that much and you do it that repeatedly. And, you know, like I've kept all that, and I use that shit every day that I'm an artist. And the stuff I learned when I was in art school, I use it every day.
Well, that's a wild. It reminds me like when I used to work at this comedy club in San Jose, California. I was actually the doorman, the host of the, and I'd check people in. It was the best job I ever had. I did over like 50 demo reels for videos for comics. I met my writing partner there. Anyways, I'm in the outer circle of that, but like, it was because I used to think maybe I'd want to go into comedy a little bit. And then when I started seeing the repetition, like the show and then the routine, and then the next night would be a very, you know, really as a script, and it was muscle memory that these guys were doing, and seeing it on sort of the peripheral looking in, you sort of see the rhythm and the dynamics and the feelings and the personalities and the, you know, just all these scenarios that then I realized I wanted to be a go do that. It sounded like a hellish life, you know. I would have wound up dead in a fucking Motel 6 somewhere.
Yeah, it definitely takes a certain personality to get into that world.
Yeah, and you don't do it half-ass, like, you know, you do it all or nothing. You don't do it
exactly
for just like being an artist or something like that. But like the seeing the routine of that is similar to, it's a muscle memory that they're using as well, and you kind of go on that, and then you're so confident with it, you just go, and then you know what's fun, and because your stuff is pretty anatomically correct, like proportion wise, but also, I mean, and I know other artists do this, like Attaway has sort of different perspectives and forced perspectives and stuff like that. Do you ever, like, gosh, there's so many, I kind of almost have two questions in one. It's like, do you like to go into those more outrageous perspectives, or do you see, because your stuff is, we'll get into your mural stuff in a moment, but like your perspectives are so sharp.
Yeah.
I
I mean, I
bunch
did
of
a lot
lights
more
and lighting.
distorted.
I'm sorry, yeah.
I did a lot more like distorted figures and kind of like pushing the proportions and stuff when I first started showing in LA. Because I basically came from a super classical background, right, where everything was anatomically correct, everything was direct observation. Even. Like we were discouraged from working from photographs. That's how like old school they were. You know, it was like, no, you gotta, because you draw differently. You know, if you're drawing a person who's sitting in front of you versus drawing a photograph from that exact same angle with the same lighting, they're gonna look different. And a trained eye can actually tell. Like I can tell when someone's drawn something from life than from a photo. It just looks different.
Same.
Yeah, there's a different depth perception. You're actually drawing a three-dimensional object. When you focus on their nose, their ear goes out of focus. When you focus on their ear, their nose goes out of focus. That's the nature of the focal length of binocular vision, right? You don't have to deal with that in a photograph, right? Yeah. Everything's in focus because it's all on the same plane, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's this idea that drawing from direct observation trains you the best because it trains you in how to challenge, how to overcome the challenges for shortening and things like that, and focal length. But then when I got to LA, I immediately got into the whole pop surrealism scene, and at the time it was called lowbrow art, right? And then pop surrealism, and now I think it's called new contemporary, which I find to be slightly redundant. But that had a huge effect on me because I was like, oh shit, I've been kind of like an art snob this whole time I was in school. And now I'm seeing how people are not using the classical formulas, but still creating work that is absolutely captivating. And just, it motivated me to try something different. And so basically for like the next 12 or 13 years, I stopped using reference. So I decided I'm going to do all my paintings from imagination, from memory, and I'm going to see where that takes me. And that's how I was able to kind of first formulate the ideas of like how to paint. I started painting with a guy that was an abstract painter. We would do these collaborations together that were crazy abstract pieces, shit I'd never done before, using everything, that all the leftover art materials that we had that we didn't use for anything else. So we were just layering on crayons and paint and like marker and inks and shit like that, and using tape and masking shit off. And I derived a lot of my my current style from all of that experimentation, because we probably did like 14 or 15 pieces together over the course of like a year and a half or 2 years. Wow. And it was cool because it was kind of like all the stuff that my peers were doing in art school that I was ignoring, right? Because I was like, yeah, I can see the value in trying to lock into your expressive side, but I feel like school is there to train you in the technical stuff, because the technical stuff is harder. And if you get it out of the way first, then I feel like the more expressive stuff, it's easier and more natural. It's more intuitive to follow along when you're later in life. Whereas I feel like if you try to get locked too much into your expression and your voice too early, ignore the technicals. Then when you're older and you're trying to learn the technical stuff, it's almost like your brain doesn't retain it quite as well. When you're younger, you have like a neuroplasticity that it reduces as you age. It just gets harder and harder to learn new stuff. Everybody knows that. And so I just decided, like, you know what, I think it's more wise. And you know what, for me too, I was like, Da Vinci and Michelangelo didn't do this shit. They didn't splatter paint on fun walls. And they were doing what everyone else did before them and trying to do it better. And that's what I decided I was going to do. But then when I moved to LA, I was fortunate enough, again, just so much lucky things happening in my life, but to meet up with this guy, David Haskell, and we started doing these crazy abstract paintings together. And then I took all of that and went off on my own and started showing. And so a lot of my early gallery pieces were, these really distorted, elongated figures with these crazy looking faces. Like everything was very like not ugly, but not designed to be like beautiful. You know, it was like all sort of because another artist that had a lot of influence on me in art school was Egon Schiele, right? And Schiele would do the same thing. He would sort of take his figures, and they were all anatomically correct, but kind of elongate and distort them, especially towards the end of his life. And so I kind of took that aesthetic as well and sort of tried to synthesize that into something. But then, you know, it's like over the years of doing gallery work, and basically in 2016, I decided the gallery world is not tenable for me. It is not tenable for most artists to make a living. The 50% gallery fee just makes it impossible to make a good living, you know. I've
had nothing but crazy experiences with people that wanted to represent me when I first got to LA. I had two people that literally went insane on me, and they'd been working in the gallery systems, and they were kind of getting out of there, trying to start their own galleries.
Yeah.
Woo! Nut jobs. I was like, I can't even believe this is happening.
I do not envy gallerists. They have a rougher time in the world than restaurateurs. Do you know what I mean? And I would never want to get in the restaurant industry. And so I have nothing but love and sympathy for gallery owners, because they're trying to ply a trade that is so fraught with risk. I mean, you have a couple of bad months and that's it. You're fucked. Yeah. You know? But at the same time, it's like, as an artist, so 2016, I was showing at this gallery that's now closed down. It was called Cave Gallery, and they were on Abercrombie. Great fucking gallery. And I had a show where I had 7 paintings in the show. I think my show is called Hero's Journey, and it was based on Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces. It was a book that he wrote. And I sold 5 of the pieces before the show even opened, right? Yeah. That's a huge fucking success.
Giant.
Absolutely. So the show opened. I think I ended up selling 1 more piece. So, you know, selling 6 out of 7 pieces is like as good as you could possibly fucking ask for. Mm-hmm. You know, I got the money. So the show took me 3 months to prepare for. So 3 months to paint 7 pieces. Total sales were, I think, 22,000. And so I ended up walking home with 11. For 3 months, that's not going to cut it in LA. I mean, it might if you move all the way out to Pomona or something, but you can't live in LA for and be making what, $3,300 a month. Like you're barely fucking scraping by once you pay rent, right? Yeah. And so that was such a huge moment for me, because I was like, okay, so I had a great show, a show that I couldn't ask better for, and I still can't make a fucking living. Like, okay, well, what else are you gonna do? You can keep pounding your head against this rock, or you can look at your life, because thankfully by that point I'd started painting murals. And then I was like, well, shit, you know, I've had murals that paid me this much, and they only took me 1 month instead of 3, you know, and I just realized right then, I was like, okay, I've been concentrating on the wrong aspect of my career. I need to really start focusing in on big public work. And thankfully, by that point, there were all these mechanisms that had been put in place that I didn't even know about, that started to increase the demand for public work. Like I knew about some, like in 2012, LA rewrote their mural ordinance, which is why you started to see an explosion of public work right around then, right? Or I think it was 2011 or 2012. So they just made it 100% easier to legally paint a mural in LA, because before it was almost impossible. You had to register the design with the city. You had to pay like a $400 fee. It was just ridiculous, because what they were doing was they were trying to battle giant painted billboards that were being qualified as murals, right? There was it's artwork, even though it's a perfectly photoreal Transformers poster. It's like, it was hand painted, so it's artwork. So LA was like, fine, then nothing. And so for like 20 years, it was like nothing could get painted unless you went through this really onerous process of registering and paying. So in 2012, they got rid of that shit. They're like, okay, we got to make it easy for people to paint murals in our city, because we used to be the mural capital of the world back in the 70s. And so we want to recapture that title. So that happened. And then another thing that's been happening in most major cities in the US is it's called a percent for arts legislation. So in a lot of cities, it has to do with public projects. In cities like LA and San Francisco and Austin, they've actually written it in to encompass private projects as well. And what the legislation says is that for any building project within the city limits of LA, you have to take 1% of the overall construction budget and put it to public art.
Nice.
So yeah, if you have a $10 million building, you have to have $100,000 of public art on the grounds. Nice. So yeah, and so if it's a $100 million project, you got to have $1 million worth of fucking public art. Most major cities in America are doing this right now, and so there has been this explosion of demand for specifically murals, but also large public sculptures, which I'm hoping to get into soon. And so, you know, that was probably one of the most fortuitous moves that I've made, you know, in my kind of art career, was shifting my focus from gallery work to murals, because murals pay, you know, like.
And so, like, do you get like, what's the difference in the kind of satisfaction you get from doing an oil painting versus a mural?
Murals are,
that's an open-ended question.
No. I can answer that very simply. Murals are way more satisfying.
Yeah.
Look, don't get me wrong. I love
for the experience of the being outside.
Like everything about it.
You're not afraid of heights?
So they take a fraction of the time.
Yeah.
Right. It's odd, because once you figure out the tricks to painting at scale, it's easier than painting at small scale, right?
Can you give us some of those tricks that you're allowed to talk about?
I mean, essentially the main thing is you have to be really good with what transfer technique are you going to use to get your image blown up. So one thing about mural painting that's different than a painting is you do the painting first. So I do all my murals digitally. I use Procreate. I have an iPad with an Apple Pencil. It's the best interface. I know a lot of people use Wacom tablets and things like that. I would suggest trying an Apple Pencil. A lot of those, they now have the rubberized tips too. So it's a very intuitive process, especially with the touchpad. Procreate is a great program. It's like a Photoshop killer. It really is. It's the only thing I use.
Did you remember that when Photoshop came out? I swear, for the next fucking 10 years, everything looked like it was Photoshopped. And I actually was at a party or something a long time ago in Topanga or something, and it was a million years ago, and it's probably like in '97 or something like that. And this girl was, oh yeah, I'm a painter, I'm an artist. She was really cool. It was a cool couple. They had this like 8 foot by 8 foot canvas, and I was looking at it, and it had all this ornate stuff, and I was like, it didn't look, the fingerprint wasn't there.
Right.
The human hand wasn't there. And I was like, and it wasn't finished necessarily, but I was like, what, did you do this freehand? Or she goes, no, we Photoshop it, and then we blow it up, and then we trace it. I was like, oh, because it looked too perfect. It looked like a magazine cover, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. So also one thing I want to ask you back, can you spend a little bit more time with us? Because I didn't pay for the extra on this Zoom. Could you come up and talk a little bit more, because we got 10 minutes before it ends? Could I invite you back just for a little bit longer?
Yeah, of course.
So let's talk until we get cut off, and it'll take 5 minutes to download, and I'll invite you back. So let's just talk. You'll know, because the screen will go blank. So after that, I'll invite you back. So let's continue with your process, because that's a really interesting situation.
Yeah. So basically, the murals get designed 100% digitally first, and then once everything is completely finished, then the transfer is the big thing. Is how do you get your image from a computer screen up to 40 feet tall or whatever on a wall. So there are basically 3 methods, I guess 4 technically, but 5 of you count freehand, but nobody wants to freehand a fucking mural.
Jules
Only
Muck
beginners
will.
do that.
Jules Muck will.
Yeah, only beginners do that, because what they're trying to transfer their painting techniques to scale. So the main disadvantage of that is that you don't get perfect transfer of the design. You never get perfect transfer of the design. You might, if you want to spend a month trying to get the drawing perfectly sketched out on a giant wall, you could do that. It's a waste of fucking time.
Yeah.
I tend not to get paid by the hour on these jobs. I tend to get paid by the job.
People like ask you, how long did it take you to this painting up? I was like, I don't know, I'm 53 years old now. I mean, it took me 53 years old. I mean, time, money, you know what? So continue. I'm sorry. Good.
So you gotta use a transfer method. So the old school way of doing it is called paper pouncing. So this is how Michelangelo did the Sistine Chapel. This is sort of the way that people have been transferring murals forever. This is the way they do those giant 9-story tall fucking Apple advertisements that they paint on the sides of buildings. They can't project those, right? So it's all paper pouncing. And so what that is what Michelangelo would do is he would draw it was called a cartoon. So it was a 2-scale charcoal drawing. So let's say he was working on like the creation of Adam, right? So he's got Adam reclined. Adam, I think, is about 9 or 10 feet tall, you know, on the Sistine Chapel wall. So what Michelangelo would do, he'd set up a bunch of pieces of paper, you know, glue them together so that it was the exact size of the panel that he was going to work on. Then he would do an exact scale drawing of what he was going to paint onto the ceiling. And then he and his assistants would take a needle and they'd go along each line and they would poke holes and they'd flip the paper over and sand it so that the holes, you know, didn't close up. And then he'd get the plaster, because, you know, the Sistine Chapel is a fresco. So fresco is, you're basically painting raw pigments into wet plaster. And then when the plaster sets, that becomes the painting. So he would set out the plaster in what's called a giornata. Giornata is basically a day's work, right? So he would estimate exactly how long, how much he could paint in a day, because that's about how long it would take plaster to set, right? Then he would literally, with a knife, carve out the outline of the figure, right? And then he'd stick the paper on, take a bag of charcoal dust, pat it through all the holes, take it away, and now he's got a dotted line of the exact thing, and then he would paint on top of that, right?
Wow.
So I still do that. I still use paper pouncing. The only difference is I have a pouncing machine. It's an electrical box. So what you do is you set up a big piece of sheet metal, and then you put you know, with magnets, stick a piece of paper on top of the sheet metal. Then you take your projector, project the image. And then what this machine does is, as you draw over the lines, an electric current just, it punches thousands of tiny little holes all at once as you drag the stylus over the metal. And then you take that piece of paper, stick it on a wall, and take graphite powder, because it works better than charcoal powder, and boom, boom, boom. And that's literally what it, and so I still use that I did a project in El Monte a couple of months back where I couldn't project because the wall looked out over a major intersection. So there's nowhere to place a projector. So I just had to pounce it. So I have my sheet metal is 3x6. So I can only work in 3x6 sections. So this mural was 30 by 20, right? So what I had to do is take that mural into the computer, break it up into 3x6 foot squares, and then you project each square. And I ended up with probably like 22 or 23 rolls of paper. And then you take those rolls of paper up to the wall, one by one, you know, number 1, number 2, number 3. And as you go, you're putting graphite powder, take it down, and now you have a dotted line, right? So that's the first transfer method. It's called pouncing. The second is gridding. Everybody knows gridding, right? You take your image, you put a grid, you take your wall, you put the grid on there. You have to make sure the grids are the same size, otherwise it's not going to work. A variation on that.
Rip Kronk did that. I love Rip Kronk. You know Rip, right? Rip Kronk. Rip Kronk.
No.
He's the guy who did the Morrison in Venice. He's done the Aardvark guys. He's really he did the Venus de Milo, History is Myth.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He did Abbot Kinney on Abbot Kinney, the Brick Wall.
Yep.
That's Rip Kronk. Yeah. I saw him because he was on the pod, and we did and then I happened to be in LA, and I watched him redo the Starry Night. Right.
Gotcha.
And I just love seeing he had that 8x10 piece of paper gridded out, with 1s, 2s, and 3s and 4s. And I just and then the light grid on the thing. I just liked his, I don't know, old school, but fun. Well, not as old school as the fucking what you just explained, but
paper pellet, yeah.
Tactile, because by the time he's done with it, the paper is practically falling apart because he's been hammering so much.
I that's why I always laminate my shit. So there's a modern variation on the old school grid, which is called the scribble grid, which you see a lot of graffiti artists use, right? So scribble grid is you go up to the wall and you start making little symbols, right? You could write a whole story if you wanted to. The key is you want your symbols to look different, right? Then you cover the entire wall with symbols, and then you take a picture of it. Then you Photoshop, you transfer your image on top of the wall, and now you use those scribbles as a grid.
Okay.
So it's called the scribble grid, right? So it's a variation of grid. And then the third method is, which is always the best method if you can, is project. Just project directly onto the wall. If you have the space and you can do it, just project. Yeah. And then that's it. And then the main thing too is that if you're projecting, you gotta get every fucking detail that you see onto the wall while you're projecting, because there's this weird thing where your brain, because the projection is the full image on the wall, almost feels like you've already finished the paintings. It's kind of odd. And so as you're tracing, you'll take shortcuts. You'll be like, oh well, I'll know where that is. Or, oh yeah, no, I can get, once I get to here, I'll know where to. No. Get every fucking detail, everything you can get while you're projecting, because once the projection's down, you might, there might be a couple of images, a couple of areas where you could fill it in, exactly. But if you have 15 or 16 of those areas, that's hours of work.
I projected and I did a mural of these people. Anyways, this is so stupid at this fucking restaurant. Anyways, the job never got finished. So they went and had somebody else do it. But it was just stupid. I bought a projector and projected. It was coming out fucking dope as shit. It's black and white. It's like the West End or something like that. A cafe. Anyways, the East End. But like staring at that, like projection, the light hitting off the wall. I like the graphic. I like the powder graphic stuff. I like having it drawn on like that. It's much better for the eyes to intake, and you get the specific lines. It's without the head, because it starts playing with you, especially if you're doing it in a dark room at night and you're seeing the lines. You're trying to it fucks with your eyes and shit.
Yeah. So one thing that I try to do is I try to project in a situation that's not completely dark. Mm-hmm. Because as you just said, it's important to be able to see the lines you already did. So I'll have my partner stand in front of the projector and block it so that I can actually see the wall. And then I'll be like, okay, can you move? And then block it again.
That's smart right there. I didn't have that.
And then if I'm working on a large wall where I can't really control the lighting, I'll have a headlamp on. So when she blocks it, I'll flick the headlamp on.
Record, admit, yay, the recording, man. We're doing it, round 2.
All right.
So Let's see if I can get you to twist that camera. Ow! Let's see if we can do it again. We'll go sideways again, further.
Oh yeah, it wasn't. There we go.
Man, these computers are fucking sophisticated. It's crazy. We're living in the future. So, actually, speaking about the future, like how, like, it kind of goes with what you were talking about with the really Da Vinci, all those guys. How, because since the photograph was invented and media, TikTok, all these different references to how we regurgitate reality into a visual story. As have it's funny to look at, like, the perspectives of what they're, because when they painted those paintings, those were basically the closest thing they could get to a photograph.
Exactly.
You know, that was
their main motivation.
Yeah, and only the rich could afford it, and the church
or institutions. Exactly. It was mostly institutions.
So these artists, these amazing people that people probably will never know their names, were doing some of that stuff too, right? And they were basically indentured servants to these corporations. And is there a difference between now too much and what's and then and now, or is it the same fucking thing?
I mean, I think that there's certainly similarities. You know, you could look at a lot of similarities, but then there are also very, very marked differences. You know, like, I don't know if you've heard the phrase, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, right?
No,
So
I like it though. That's good.
Yeah, you know, the idea is that it's never exactly the same. There's always going to be differences. And so the main difference now is that you do have the rock star artists, right? You do have the Damien Hirsts and what's that other asshole's name? Jeff Koons of the world, right? You have these multi-millionaire, almost billionaire artists that, as far as I can tell, don't actually do any of their own art, right? Because the whole thing, the entire motivation for art changed. The photographs changed the entire motivation for art, right? That's technology always disrupts human practices. And what photographs did is, before photographs, what was supposed to be the true purpose of the artist was perfect representation of nature, because nature was perfect. And if you could represent nature as perfectly as you could, that was your highest purpose, your highest goal. And then you got different interpretations, because people are different. They're going to interpret, their perfect interpretation of nature is different from yours and mine. And so that's why you got different styles. But everyone's motivation was the same. They were all aiming toward the same goal. They were coming at it different ways because they were different people. And they ended up getting different results because they're different people. But all of their they were in lockstep in terms of what they were trying to do, right? Once photographs came along, that was it, because that's the perfect representation of nature. And guess what? We did it with a machine. We did it with chemicals. We did it with chemistry and science. We didn't do it with artistry and mastery and technique. And so what it did is for the people for whom their artistic motivation was the perfect representation of nature, I'm sure photographs sapped their motivation. I'm sure they had to go and find something new, because all of their motivation was around this one goal, and now someone else achieved that goal and made it achievable for you. You but just buy one of these things and now you can do it. So I'm sure their motivation was sapped. But for the artists for whom the interpretation was more important than the representation of nature, I'm sure it energized them, because now they could think about different stuff. They could start branching off a little bit artistically, and that's why you began to see more, like, sort of risk taking with art, impressionism and all that kind of stuff. That, it obviously,
they also had a guide. They had a representation before to draw on, and not just a reality. They didn't have to be there to see a train coming through a movie screen. They, to see the picture of it, and it changed. Sure, it changed the whole. Is a whole, like, it's like the industrial age, or how it changed the entire scope of the planet. It's also like in reference to like the first time we've ever seen the Earth for the first time. Whenever that perspective was shown, that was the first time we actually saw a picture of where we are at in the universe.
Yeah.
And
the little blue dot. Little blue dot.
What's that?
I think the photo was called the little blue dot.
Yeah.
It was, published in Time. Yeah.
And same is sort of happening with the Webb telescope in a way. So that's the next, like, these intervals of perspectives are becoming shorter and faster in time.
Yep. Yeah. So technology has the technological evolution and like revolution is telescoped, right? So it took whatever it was, like 60,000 years for us to basically get agriculture, and then it took us 200 years to industry, and now it's about 30 years for computers, right? And so all compressing. And so one of the reasons why a lot of futurists are worried about AI is because we're looking at, it's called an exponential progression, right? So they call it a hockey stick curve.
You can see it. It's in our lifetimes.
Yeah. At a certain point, the progress will just almost verticalize. So the jump will be so fast that we won't see it coming. And that's always the case with exponential progression. The human mind can't actually grasp exponential progression. We can talk about it, and we can label it, but we can't actually grasp it or do anything about it. And that's the main issue that people are worried about, is that when it hits us, we won't know. It'll be way too late by then.
You know what? It's probably already hit us. And this is the echo of it. It's like, this is the, it's happening. Oh, it already happened. What? It's really jumping fast, even as we say talk right now. It's feel like,
well, we are going through, another, technological revolution. It's also, so human beings develop what are called soft technologies. So our first soft technology was the written language. Our second soft technology was coined money, right? So soft technology is basically, it's some sort of advance in thinking that involves an object or an item that can be 1,000 different forms. It can be, ever changing, ever different, but it's ubiquitous. It's just everywhere, and it's used by everybody, right? So written language was the first, coin money was the second, software. So our third soft technology right now our third soft technological revolution that humanity has undergone, and it's software. Every time we go through one of these revolutions, we have giant global upheaval, disruption through all fronts, right? And what tends to happen is during that disruption, we concentrate on the symptoms of the technology. We concentrate on the economic disruption, the political disruption, geographical people moving and having to get moved. And we look at the conflicts and the wars, and we don't actually concentrate on the thing that's causing it. So the thing that's causing it gets to just chug along and evolve and progress and become whatever it's going to be, because we're focused on the wake of destruction that is leaving behind, right? And so that's what software is doing right now.
Well said. Well said. I totally track all that.
That's not me. That I got all of that from a really great blog called Breaking Smart that was written back in like 2015 or 2014. It was funded by Jesus. Why can't I remember the name?
You funded that? Jesus funded that? The Christian Coalition?
Yeah.
He was the first hippie. Famous hippie. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good because I think people need, or like, I'm a very visual person, obviously you are as well, but people feel like the more we can communicate this, which is what art is, and speaking and casual conversation and being present, as we express this triggers other people to do the same thing. Like my mind is kind of like melting in a good way right now, but because it's what it resonates. You know, the truth always resonates, and if we can curate a visual interpretation of that, like even words or discussing it, it activates, I think, more, you know, brains, and that's what we're doing, is kind of like stepping into this future, knowing all what you just said is just ramping up and ramping up. Is like the unknowing is the scary part, but the destruction of the new technology, because everybody wants that new technology. You don't think kids in fucking Peru don't want their fucking iPhones? They'd see what we, you know, when I went over to Peru like a million years ago, they're very sympathetic towards what was happening in the war that was just started around that time, and in Afghanistan, or was it I don't know, one of those guys, but but like people want, even in the Amazon jungle. We did a little tour over there, and I met the natives. We went shopping around, and I said, and they were all, it's an interesting experience. I have it on video. I documented the whole thing I'm making it, but like it's like I said, hey, how you doing? I said, so I don't understand your language too much, and this girl's like, what? Money. We want your money, you know, because they had a little gift shop in the Amazon, and they dressed up in their native wear, and you know, brought out the things. We traveled like hours, and anyways, it's a funny thing. But like people see Russia, what's happening right now in Russia.
Yeah.
He's not, I mean, the people are gonna, I mean, have to take it back, aren't they? I mean, not to get too political, but like it's like how inside, I mean, people are fleeing he's arresting people because they're trying to avoid a draft.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, I don't know what the fuck Putin was thinking in the first place when he invaded. Well, I do know what he was thinking. He was thinking, they're going to crumble in 2 days, 2 or 3 days. We're going to roll in. They're going to abandon their positions, and the people within Ukraine are going to come out and thank us because their whole government is being run by Nazis. So I think he actually convinced himself of that. The problem was the people of Ukraine were bracing for an invasion for the last 14 years. They have been training. They have all kinds of like civilian militias and things set up already. They didn't understand the devastating power of our new handheld rocket systems, Javelin rockets and whatnot, anti-tank systems that are just so much better than anything we've seen so far, right? It's the whole reason why we were able to, why Ukraine was able to cripple their entire advance, was because their tanks were getting destroyed by the dozen. You know,
and the Russian tanks didn't look that good either. Did you see what they were pushing around there?
Russia has some good tanks. You know what I mean? Like if we're fighting a giant land war in the middle of Europe in 1990, they would have one of the most formidable forces in the fucking world. There's not much that you could do against what they have, right? Arrayed in front of you. But now you have, they're called fire and forget missiles, right? So you can't even do counterfire because these guys will lock onto the tank. It's like 3.5 miles away. They fire this little missile. It goes up into the sky. They run away. They don't even watch. They just drop the fucking tube because it's useless now. They run away. They get in their truck and they drive away. And a minute later, the fucking missile hits the top of the tank and it just blows it up. And there's just nothing they can do about it because, you know, they weren't able to establish air superiority.
And did we?
So nothing that
the U.S.'s help and the NATO stuff with that has definitely empowered the Ukraine with the. Didn't we give them a bunch of stuff?
Of course. No, look, they wouldn't be doing a giant counteroffensive right now if we hadn't given them the HIMARS systems. You know, like HIMARS was the game changer. That's what has turned the entire tide of the battle. Like the anti-tank stuff, you know, they're called man-pads. They were using it against helicopters and airplanes as well. That was like basically stopped the advance because Russia was like, holy shit, we're losing a lot of material right now. You know, you got like one guy in a field with a rocket that costs $100,000 and he can take out a tank that costs $5 million, you know, and it's just like, you can't sustain that kind of arithmetic, you know. when the enemy can take that toll from you with literally nothing. It's just a couple of dudes with 5 or 6 of these. They can stop an entire armored column from advancing. But then our HIMARS systems that we gave to them, that's what's been making them flee now, because it's, you know, it's like the high mobility artillery rocket system, right? So it's basically all it is instead of a giant howitzer, you know, where you need a spotter and you need all kinds of other shit to get the artillery around to strike in the right place. You take that same amount of explosives, you put it on the back of a fucking giant rocket that's about 14 feet long. You stick 4 of these things into a tube, set onto a truck. The rockets guide themselves.
Yeah. You just gotta get the right trajectory.
Yeah. You find a field, you fire off all 4 in like a minute. You know, it's gonna take them, the enemy, it takes between 5 to 10 minutes for them to calculate what's called a reverse azimuth and figure out what your firing position was to fire back on you. By then, the truck is long gone. And these things can, you know, we gave them the ones that have, I think, a 90-mile range. So they park 30 miles off the front line. They can fire 60 miles behind the enemy lines. So we've just been taking out all their fuel depots, all their ammo depots. They've been abandoning.
What about that power plants, though? That power plant situation over there. Don't they have a nuclear power plant that they took over and shut down and all that crap?
I think they had to shut it down because the Russians were shelling it.
Yeah.
That's the news that I saw. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but yeah. I mean, look, this is running a little far of the art talk, but
okay, yeah. Okay, let's get back to art talk. Okay.
Yeah, but Putin has stepped into a giant hornet's nest right now. He's so fucked. My only worry is that he's going to start using tactical nukes. That's the only thing.
We'll get off this subject in a second, but I just saw that the U.S. had told them that would be very, very bad if they did that, and U.S. would react accordingly with NATO, very, 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 very fast. But anyway,
I think it was.
Let's talk about painting and creativity and love of art and the female form and the whole thing. So your past is like, you've got a lot of like rich because I love Da Vinci and Van Gogh and Kandinsky and Matisse, and they've all Frazetta, Boris Vallejo, Ralph Bakshi, Chuck Jones, Tex Avery, all these different things, you know, John Belushi, comedy, you know, were influences like you know, and like yourself, I used to I could draw cartoons really good very young. Like I could do like a perfect Popeye, and I could do like a lot of Tex Avery characters, and I love Tex Avery is really, there's a cross between Da Vinci and Tex Avery, really, because I was so impacted by, and I made a choice as well early on to kind of go this, and if I can be so bold, and try to do a Da Vinci thing instead of like a cartoon, because I saw what a cartoon seemed too easy, and that it was this other world over here that was kind of. But I love cartoons. I can still draw really well. I think I'll do more of that. But like, where do you want to see? That's my story. But like, the murals that you're working on now, you've been. How many murals have you done in the last year?
The last year, let me think. I think 5, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah. I could.
Is your mural work taking you all over the world as well? Like, can you tell us
I haven't gone international yet, but I have traveled. Mostly in California. I did one piece for Art Basel, like back in 2011, I think, when I first started painting murals, 2012. And then I did a mural at Northeastern University in Boston in like 2014. I've done some stuff in Chicago. I think what other states. And then festivals, a lot of festivals.
Yeah. Do you like
Yeah.
painting live?
I definitely do. That was sort of how I got my start in LA. I started doing a lot of live paintings for free, just for my gallerist friends for their openings, and then one of my buddies ran a bar in Monica, and he needed something interesting for Thursday nights, so he started bringing me in every Thursday to live paint. So I would just bring all my shit, and I'd set up an easel and a light, and I would just work on a painting, and I'd like try to make it as interesting as possible and just run layers and kind of.
Do you like I've done some live painting and stuff like that. Do you feel like pressure when you're doing? Because I always felt like, because especially I've done it a few times, like when I used to sell in Venice Beach, like just because I still have a couple. Very rarely did I paint in public, just because you need a water source and all blah blah, everything goes real fast. But like
it's a big setup.
Yeah, people don't know. They want to see it be like animate. I feel like they want to see it animated. Like they want to see it change and go before their eyes, or they want to see, because I don't know. It just felt the pressure to do that. It was just like, hold on. I like to smoke a joint for a second. I like to fucking drink a beer and like look at this. It's not like my shit's not fast. Like
yeah, but mine is not either. That's the whole thing. Is I've never been one of those guys that finishes a painting in a day, right? I like to refine my shit. It takes a while, and there's no shortcut to that. Like, there are for some freaky people out in the world, like that guy Kim Jong-is, who can just do a finished drawing from start to finish. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's a Korean dude that just renders as he goes, so he'll just spontaneously. Anyway, but for most people, yeah, refining takes a while. So when I first started live painting, I would say the first like 15 or 20 times that I live painted, I was super nervous. I had to get pretty drunk to kind of like go forward with it. Once I got over my initial nerves, then the main thing is you have to be good with showing people that middle stage where the painting looks like shit. Every painting has that stage where you're laying stuff in. The important stuff isn't in yet. You haven't gotten in any of the main contrasts and stuff, and it just looks like crap. And people will see it like that, and you have to be okay with people seeing that, because you have to know where you're headed. You have to know that that's fine if you see it in mid stage.
Yeah.
That's what I signed up for, because, and then that's what happens as a muralist, like when you're in public. You're doing that.
Everyone's like a critic too. Everyone's like they're walking and singing every day. They live in the neighborhood. They're like,
yeah,
like, we're like, I don't know, like.
Well, no, because that's the best part, is as you're finishing up, people will come up and go, oh man, I saw this when you were first starting. I didn't even know what you're going for. It just looks so vague or whatever. And it's like, as long as you're doing your job right, then the ultimate reaction should be a positive one. And so that's actually really gratifying, because art is a solitary fucking profession, man. You're in your studio by yourself for hours, weeks at a time, and it's hard to get that kind of immediate feedback from a non-artist, where it's just,
it's like it's dinner theater without the dinner or the theater. It's like it's a public forum. Like, and it's super open. It's like probably the best. I mean, anyone can see it. You don't have to pay a ticket. You don't have to park a car.
Exactly. There's no barriers to entry, full accessibility. There's something very altruistic as well about doing, kind of big public art. Like I'll do murals for private entities as well, where it's not publicly accessible, but a lot of the work that I do, completely 100%. You can walk up and graffiti that fucker if you wanted to, and that's the deal you sign with public art. When you throw your hat out in that ring, what you're saying is, I am holding myself open to you, to your criticism, to your plagiarism, and to your vandalism. If that's what you want to do with my work, so be it. I can't do anything about that. I can come back and mitigate that shit. I can paint over it and try to make sure like, I can't do anything about someone that's going to tag a piece of mine. You just have to be okay with it.
That makes it even more subjective. It's
You know, I will say that over the years, I have over a dozen pieces in LA and, you know, the surrounding areas. And I've only had two pieces that have gotten hit. And one put a really tiny little tag that was the same color as the background. So you have to look close to see it.
Right.
He's really clever about it. So I never, I left it alone. And then the other piece, the reason it got hit was because it was, so it's next to the Running Goose in on Cahuenga, and they have this parking lot, and they had lights that were shining on it. And as soon as the lights burned out, it fucking got hit. So as soon as that back parking lot became a dark area, then suddenly all these tags got on there. So, but everything else, it's interesting. It's almost like there's an unwritten code amongst even taggers that if a piece is well done, leave it alone. You know, find a mural where something at a time, go tag shit. You know, like, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I heard this one story about what to do if you have a lot of kind of mural. Like, because are you still in LA?
Yeah.
And somebody told me because I live back alleyways get peed in a lot, right? And they said, and I almost at this one spot, I almost did this because this one spot kept on getting pissed on, and it's outside my window, and anyways, in an alleyway in Venice somewhere. And they said put a this is just a good life hack if anybody needs this to happen, is put a Mother Mary on the outside, like the Virgin Mary on the outside, and you won't get any tag. You won't get tagged because people won't piss on the. There's a lot of, you know, it's a subconscious thing with people. They won't piss on, you know, the Virgin Mary.
I think
it's a smart move. It's cool.
That's really good advice.
Yeah, it's a really cool idea. So how is LA these days? I'm in Oregon right now. Just been here for since late September. How is LA? How's the climate over there?
Oh, climate's great right now.
Well, that's a stupid question.
Yeah. No, so we just passed the heat wave like a week and a half ago, where it was insufferable for about 2 weeks. But right now it's really awesome. I don't get out a whole lot, so I can't tell you like what it's like in terms of like the social scene or like, you know, it certainly looks like most of the pandemic era like homeless encampments and fucking crazy chaos is gone. You know, Venice looks like it's back to normal. Santa Monica looks like it's back to normal. You know, I think that the problems in LA are certainly bad. They're also concentrated into small pockets of the city. I think that gets conflated quite a bit in the media, you know, because they'll take a camera, go down to Skid Row. Skid Row it's Dante's Inferno. It's a fucking Hieronymus Bosch painting. You don't want to go there in the daytime.
What is that?
I mean, it is
4th and 5th Street or something like that.
It shifts around a little bit, but it's in that area, and it's a terrible fucking problem. It's a human tragedy that's unfolding before our eyes.
I have a story about that real quick because it goes with that. I became homeless, and I was trying to figure out how to, you know, I was in LA fighting the dream, you know, trying to fucking survive, selling $2,000 paintings for $500, you know, doing all that stuff. And because you want it, you still want the you know, you're chasing the dragon a little bit. And so I went and got like a voucher to stay at a place. She's all, are you homeless? Do you want to stay in a place? Do you need a place to stay tonight? I said, well, I mean, I guess I could check it out. And, you know, I was already in line. It was hardcore, right? It was hardcore.
Yeah.
And I think I might have had my dogs maybe. They gave me a voucher and I went around the neighborhood trying to find it. This is before GPS, cell phone, you know, and I couldn't find this fucking place. And I thought, oh, it's an apartment building. Oh, it looked kind of nice. I was like, no, this is it's on the other side. And I went and I parked my car. It was off of 4th and 5th Street. I was walking and I had like a backpack shit, and I was walking
Yeah.
with people in the sidewalk, and I was like, holy fucking shit, dude. And like people pissed and people, just it was hardcore. And so I got, and
Yeah.
the girl looks at me at the window. She's all, wait, what are you here for? I said, yeah, they gave me a voucher to stay. I could stay for like 5 to 7 days if I want. And she's like, look at me like, white boy, like, what the fuck are
Yeah.
you doing here? Like, I was like,
Yeah.
hey, I almost was taking it as an experience. And then I walked up, and these hallways were thin, and there's doors open. And I really didn't take a shower. It was like 100 degrees that day. And so I looked at my room, which is just a shit bucket, right, of a room, like 4 foot,
Yeah.
4 foot, fit a bed, and anyway. And so I was like, fuck it, I'll take a shower real quick. So I went into the shower. I took a shower, and that was one of the most disgusting things. The floor had all this squishy stuff on it. I was like, what am I doing
Oh
here?
my
I
God.
think I left so fast I forgot my shit.
Yeah.
Anyways,
That's terrifying.
it was an experience. But okay, so we got 10 minutes. What are you excited about doing? What are your projects? I mean, I want to talk about, okay, we can break this into 5 minutes unless you want to come back again, but I don't want to hold you to that, but you can always do that. Let's talk about the masks that you're making for like a few minutes, and then also talk about what you have happening on the horizon that you'd like your fans to know about or that you're excited about.
Yeah. So actually just finished a build on Brew show coming up in December. It's one of my good friends, Steve Martinez, who's an amazing muralist as well. But he's curating his first show in Long Beach. So he asked me to put a piece into a show. So I just finished that. It's like a here, I'll grab it.
Yeah, woo, get it. Yeah, let's take a look at it.
So I just started masking it off for the paint job. But it's a cardstock sculpture that I then sprayed Flex Seal onto to kind of plasticize it, and then I just put a coat of metallic black on top of it.
What's the interior of that? Is that safe to wear with all the chemicals that you use?
Oh no! So this is a wall piece.
Okay.
So this hangs.
Oh, okay.
It hangs on the wall like a trophy head.
Okay, because I thought it was one of your masks that you could wear.
No, it's not. I would like to try to build a mask with that stuff. I think it's probably safe. I did a rhino and put Flex Seal on top of that in the beginning of January.
Is that a spray? A Flex Seal? Is that a spray?
Yeah. Spray on, and then it kind of solidifies into plastic.
Kind of plasticize. Nice.
Yeah, and then it probably stops outgassing in about 2 weeks. So I'd say at the 2-week mark, then you can have it in close proximity to your face. You're not going to get any fumes.
Cool. That's that. Even after 2 weeks, that's enough time to do that. Wow.
Yeah.
And what's the interior like? What's the interior? Just the paper apparatus or the cardboard apparatus? Or
yeah, I mean, so far it's only been cardboard. But I think if I make a paper mask, I'm probably going to need to put some foam padding into it. So I'll probably incorporate stuff like that.
Have you ever thought about making an animated movie?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly crosses my mind. I think it's just one of those things where who has the time to do all of that stuff, right? So you gotta concentrate on
choose
stuff
your battles.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you working on now? Can you tell the kids what you're excited about?
Got a couple of murals coming up. I'm doing one in Westwood soon. It's an interior of this place. I did the outside of their building in 2019. So they're bringing me back to do the lobby. I'm supposed to do another mural in December for the Cesar Chavez Foundation. I did a mural in Almonte like 3 months back. That was for them. And then I got a couple of projects coming up in the next year, and I'll work on a couple of commissions as well in the next month or two. Painting commissions, which I don't get those that often, but it's weird that 2 came in at once.
Well, your
So I
paintings
still
are
do
fucking
those.
awesome.
What's that?
I love your oil paintings. I remember when we had some shows at the the high collective or something. Do you read there?
Oh, hi. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That shit. Can you
99
believe we got away with those parties? Those
that,
we were eating
yeah.
edibles. Shit was insane, and the artwork, between like the 8 or 9 people they had in there was fucking pretty epic. I love those guys.
Yeah.
Gotta
Yeah.
give them yeah, high end, high collective or whatever. But
So
those are
so
I think they're
Cave
probably
Gallery
their
took
site.
Cave Gallery took over their space.
Yeah, yeah, I remember. And
Yeah.
Antone had Acme there for a bit on the corner. Remember Antone?
Okay.
Was that
No,
consortium or something like that?
I don't remember.
Did you ever go to the Rico Gallery when Julie Rico had her gallery on Main Street? Maybe
No.
that was well. They had Alex Gray there. I got
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he is great. He's great. I love Alex Gray. He's got sort of he's almost got like your color palette. You did and I wanted to see if you can grab this photograph of this mural that you did. I saw the photograph on Facebook of. It's a white wall. I don't know if it's in an airport or something like that, but it has more orange. There's a female figure in as a wall or an archway or something like that. Am I totally stoned out of my mind? Because
It's not ringing a
it's
bell.
like white background and orange blues. Gosh, okay, forget it. That was a stony tangent. I thought you'd be because you did it relatively recently. You did it relatively recently, but now knowing how many murals you just did this last year, it makes sense that they might blur. So, real quick, where do you get your I hate to even, but where do you get your inspirations for your color palette? Are they dependent on the client that you're dealing with, or are they want you to just go bananas? Are they really rigid? Have you had some conflict sometimes, or is it all butter?
No, I actually prefer to get a lot of design cues and direction from the clients that hire me. I think when I started off, I was looking for clients who were like, "Hey, we just love your work. We want you to be you," right? So I took those jobs, and it turns out they never mean that.
They didn't want that.
They always want
They
something.
didn't want that much you.
They always want something. The problem is they haven't drilled down into what it is. So if you enter into a situation where someone's like, just do you, you're going to end up in a process of elimination where they go, yeah, it's not really what I want. Can you try something else? And it's like, no, how about you give me some direction?
Yeah.
So I'm not spinning my wheels for a week. And so I actually really prefer, and I'll ask for more. If a client is like, hey, just do you, I'll be like, well, do you have any preferences? Are there any things you'd rather have? Are there things you'd like me to stay away from? Like, so I actually try to get as much as specific information as I can. And a lot of the time, one of the easiest things for them to give me is a color palette, because they at least know what like the office or the building is going to look like.
Pretty specific. So they want to match their furniture and shit like that.
Yeah. And I've definitely done jobs where it's been more, hey, just kind of bring us something, and then it's like you sort of bring them something and then they help you refine it there, right? So you're not, reinventing the wheel at the time.
Yeah,
you're just refining.
treading water. You're like these. The same commission painting, same thing. It's like as specific as they can be. That gives you the whole. Oh, I know where to go with this. I know what they're. It's
exactly.
2 minutes.
It's easier. It's way easier.
Should we wrap it up? Do you want to come back for a third, or do you want to wrap it up? We should wrap it up, maybe, huh?
Yeah, I think I need to wrap it up.
Okay.
Really fun.
What's that?
This was really fun. I definitely like to come back. Man.
Please, and come back anytime. And thanks for tell them your Instagram, your .coms, your any place you want to find Mr. Park.
So it's super easy. It's John Park Art, JohnParkArt. So that's my Instagram. JohnParkArt.com is my website. and that's basically the two. I don't really do much on Facebook, and I don't have TikTok or anything like that. So Instagram, John Parker.
You're not TikToking? Oh, do me a favor. If you could, after this situation, if you can send me some, if you have any video of you painting or anything that you want to, like an MP4 or something like that. If you have anything, I don't know, even off your phone or something like that. You don't have to, but if
I might have some.
Yeah, if you want to just send me something in the next half hour, I'm gonna start editing this thing tonight and hopefully have it out tonight. What's the last great movie you ever saw?
Last great movie, probably the new remake of Dune.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to see. Christopher Walken's going to be in Dune 2.
The second one, really?
Yeah, they got.
Do you know which character he's supposed to play?
They're not telling. They're not saying.
Oh, wow. Okay, that'll be interesting. I mean, that guy's hit or miss. You know,
I love
he was a great actor who started. Yeah, he started to kind of parody himself a little bit. Look, all those guys, De Niro, Pacino, they passed their ripening date. You know, they're sort of
part of the
become,
process. You don't just stay doing operating on bodies in a thing, and then it changes. It evolves. You get your sculptures, and you get your murals, and you do different things with.
message, Uncle, the message.
For those who don't know, it's Brett.
Friends, Brett with friends, Brett with friends, it's never going to end. Brett with friends, Brett with friends, Brett with friends, let's do it again. Brett, he talks to people about stuff. He's the podcast man.